Before we begin today's members early access video, I want to greatly thank all of my super and supreme supporter on the channels. For the super supporters, we have Notif, Brian Wren, David Millerant, Chaz Weber, Coping or Cooking, and Supreme Bugs. And for the supreme supporters, we have Caleb Barlow and Bionic Ninja. I greatly appreciate all of your guys' support, and of course to all of my regular members. You help so much as well. You're all amazing. Thank you for your support. You help me keep doing what I'm doing. And anybody who's not a member, if you're seeing this come out on Saturday, for example, you could have seen this on Fridays. If you want to get access to those early access videos that come out every single Friday for members, you can join up on the YouTube channel right now for as little as $5 a month and get access to that as well as other perks, such as private channels in the Discord. Anyways, let's get on to the video. Hello there, and welcome back to the Codex. So I wasn't planning on making this video at first, but across all of my videos where I show this weapon, people keep asking me over and over and over again to show the build or make a build video, exclusively going over why I think that it's the best secondary in the game, and that secondary being the OcuCore. So I decided I'll go ahead and finally do it. That way I have a video to direct you guys to in the future when people inevitably ask, why do you love the OcuCore so much? So let's go ahead and hop into that. So as an immediate note, that's going to annoy some people, but I always respond with this answer. People ask me, is this actually necessary for the weapon to be so good? You know, as good as you say it is, and that is Sentient Surge. The answer is yes, unfortunately. Yes, this augment is very expensive right now because you can't currently get it, but it will at some point come back from Nightwave. For example, maybe it'll come back on this new Nightwave that's about to start in just a few days here, as of the time of uploading this video, like 3 days. This augment is required to make the OcuCore as insane as it is. It gives you the effect of every time that you kill an enemy, it restores 20% of your magazine, like your 20% of your ammo directly back into the magazine, so you can just keep firing. And then your status chance and critical chance are increased by 60% for each tendril active. Both of those things are incredibly important because here's the way that the weapon works. Kills generate up to 4 energy tendrils that lock onto nearby enemies, and tendrils reset on reload. So every time that you reload, the tendrils go away. So that's, of course, a huge damage reset every time that happens, because going from shooting 1 beam to 5 is a lot of extra damage, especially on top of that when you get the extra 240% crit chance and status chance based on those tendrils. So thanks to the 20% of your ammo is reloaded back into the magazine every time you kill someone, you never have to lose those tendrils as long as you keep reliably killing enemies. You'll just have the main beam plus all 4 extra beams the entire time. So you constantly have all of the beams plus 240% crit chance, status chance. Now that 240% crit chance, the weapon starts with a pretty paltry 16%. So it takes you from 16 to 54% critical chance. And the status chance is higher. It starts at 24%. So with its 24% base, plus the 80% from galvanized shot, plus the 120% from running 2 dual stats, that puts you up to about 120% status chance, which is, of course, very high. And given that it's also a beam weapon, 130% status chance, actually. Yeah, about 130% status chance when everything is accounted for. So that's obviously a lot of status chance, and this is a beam weapon, so it's even better with status. It really pumps out the status, and the fire rate is super high. So you'll see it's insane at pumping out status. This is a viral heat build with very good heat weighting thanks to the primed heat to charge. So 30%, about 31% actually of the procs will be heat procs, you can see here. And thankfully, the weapon comes with both innate radiation and puncture. So puncture is really good because if you read here, the secondary effect, it says puncture temporarily reduces the target's damage output by 80%. That doesn't matter. Here's the important part. And increases critical chance of damage taken by up to 25% with multiple stacks. Up to 5 stacks specifically. It's 5 critical chance percent per stack. Up to 5 puncture stacks. So that's really important because since it has puncture innately, but a super low amount, thankfully, so it doesn't go off too often, once you get those 5 puncture stacks on there, those stacks act basically like Avenger. So you know how I said that Sentient Surge takes us up to 54% critical chance? Well, with that flat extra 25%, it goes from 54 to 79% critical chance. That's the reason why I'm not running primed pistol gambit on here. and I'm just running the crit damage prime target cracker because we already get from the augment plus the puncture procs 79% critical chance. So close enough to where I don't think I would want to use critical chance over any of these mods, although you could maybe argue for lethal torrent, but I think the 60% fire rate and 60% multi-shot is probably better value in terms of DPS. Now you definitely want to use Ruinous Extension. This plus 8 meter beam length does affect the lock-on range and the effective range of the tendrils of this weapon. So Ruinous Extension is like straight up mandatory on this weapon as the Exilus. It's actually a huge increase in its efficacy, so absolutely use this. Aside from that, like I said, just standard viral heat build. We are using, of course, Galvanized Shot, Galvanized Diffusion. Galvanized Shot's very good on this because it's, you know, with the innate radiation plus puncture and then modding for viral heat. That's 4 damage types right there. So that's 4 times 120. So that's a good amount of base damage. Then we're also using Cascadia Flare since we're using Prime T to charge. Now you can also use Encumber. I think the competition between Encumber and Flare is mostly a wash. Secondary Encumber will definitely do more single target damage. Like if you're having to beam down a single guy for a while, the amount of extra procs that you'll get on that one guy to stack up Galvanized Shot will exceed the damage of Cascadia Flare, but they're both really nice because neither of them actually require kills. I'm just going to stick with Cascadia Flare because that just almost instant 480% base damage from heat procs. And not requiring kills is really nice. Plus, Cascadia Flare is most likely an easier to get arcane for a lot of you because it just comes from the Zeraman, which is super easy to grind, as opposed to Encumber being from the Citrine farm. I think that mirror defense, which everybody hates. So I'm just going to stick with Cascadia Flare, just for the sake of you guys, to show you what that performance is like with a much easier to acquire arcane. Now, this weapon is really insane if you get a really juicy ribbon like mine. You can see here 182% multi-shot and 122 crit damage. This is a amazing upgrade over Target Cracker because it's more crit damage plus a shitload of multi-shot. So if you are fortunate enough to get your hands on a ribbon for this, this makes it substantially better. But let's go ahead and just hop into a regular mission here, and I'll show you what this weapon looks like, alright? So here's a really good example of when this weapon would shine. A lot of people, when they're doing fissures, there's 2 like kind of main ways to do fissures. You can either do an endurance type mission like a survival or disruptions, for example, and then you can stay there for 2-3 hours, for example. Or people just want to crack however many relics they have as fast as possible, so they'll do something like an exterminate. And since it's all just about speed and not rewards or like drops or anything from the enemies, they'll do it on the regular path fissures instead of steel path. So typically that'd be anywhere from like level 10 to level 50 at max. So I figured let's go towards the top end of that spectrum and go to the Adaro Exterminate on Sedna, for example, on the regular path. And this will give you a showcase example of how this weapon would work on essentially like a fissure run that you would use this for. And we will also, of course, show this on Steel Path. But I just want to show a few examples here. I'm not using any buffs on the weapon, on the frame that would affect the weapon at all, so this is just the weapon's performance. Not that that's even needed on the non-Steel Path, but as you can see, 0 aiming is required. And if you look in the bottom right, you'll see that every time I kill someone, my magazine is restored. And I'm moving fast as hell with all these movement speed mods on my Excalibur. Yeah, I'm not even seeing most of the guys that I'm killing. I'm just kind of swinging the weapon around in the general direction of where the map says they are. And the weapon automatically locks on for you and kills everything.
You're still in the clear. No detection from enemy sensors.
No detection? Well, that's good. Thank you, Lotus. There's nobody left alive to detect me. So I would hope not. Alright, let's finish up this exterminate here. You see, it doesn't take very long to do a mission like this. And again, this is giving you an idea of how long a fissure like this would take, essentially.
Stay focused. There's a heavy unit approaching. The enemy is
There we go, everybody's dead.
done. Now get to extraction.
Or at least the amount of people that I needed to kill are dead. We'll get out of there. Guarantee that was less than 2 minutes. Nope, I'm wrong. I was 2 seconds wrong. RIP. Well, yeah, so about 2 minutes for that whole exterminate, which again, that was with using no Warframe buffs, so if you were to, you know, throw any kind of buff on top of that, it could go, you know, maybe 20 seconds faster or something, and you could do sub 2 minutes runs every single time. So if you were using this Aki core for, again, like a just exterminate fissure speed runs to crack open some relics, it's just about the perfect weapon for that. Now let's show how it performs in the steel path, which let me change my frame for that, and we'll be back in just a moment. Alright, here we are in a cube of survival, back on steel path, of course. I just brought Revenant to not have to worry about dying, and again, there's no... Oh, that's right, my cat's here. Well, here's an example of your cat making you do more damage for that first little second there. Those random orange crits. And as you can see, on Steel Path, it also easily kills stuff. At least, you know, of course, at the lower levels, unbuffed. Again, there's no buffs on the Warframe. My Revenant is just keeping me alive while I show the weapon. So this is purely the Aki core. No Riven, no buffs. Just a lot of heat procs. I will admit it's not good against Acolytes. Like any weapon that derives a lot of its damage from status output, like the mass amount of heat procs in this case, Acolytes do have a status cap, so this is terrible at killing them, essentially. So you will want a different weapon for that. For example, if you're going to use the Aki core as your secondary for your main, like, mass killing weapon, you may want, like, a super chunky one-hit, very high crit weapon as your primary, or your melee, for example, to take care of Acolytes. Because that is pretty much the one weakness of this weapon, is any kind of enemy that has a status cap. Primarily Acolytes. Yeah, 183 kills here in the first minute and a half. Which means, you know, at the 1 minute mark we were definitely over 100. We'll see what we hit at the 2 minute mark here. So these guys are hiding from me, it seems. So 2 minutes, yeah, 214 kills. So even with 0 buffs, still over 100 KPM. With just this weapon, no Warframe buffs. Super easy. Now, speaking of buffs, if you want to make this weapon really crazy and unlock its full potential, then you need to, you don't have to, but you would want to buff it somehow. So let's show an example of that. So here's the Revenant build that I was using for that setup. It's basically just a test build. I had no arcanes on. I swapped my aura as well since I wasn't using Avenger. Now my regular build here uses Combat Discipline to reliably trigger Avenger, which gives you a flat extra 45% crit chance, which again, given the fact that you can already get 79% crit chance on the Aki core with Sentient Surge plus Puncture procs, this will push you over 100%, so you'll always crit and occasionally orange crit as well. And then also using Arcane Velocity, which gives you 120% fire rate to secondaries. Now with Velocity on, I would say that you could drop Lethal Torrent, because Velocity gives you twice the fire rate, so you actually are gaining 60% fire rate even with dropping this, and so you're only losing that 60% multi-shot. The thing that's much more valuable than that, since you're getting a ton of fire rate to offset losing this, you could use one of the Expel mods, like Primed Expel Grenier, for example, and that would give you an extra 55% damage up front to them, and it double dips for the heat procs, so this will make the heat procs really crazy. So let's go ahead and show you that. Then you get an example of how disgusting you can make this when you buff it up. So let's hop back into that mission, and it'll be much higher KPM. I'm going to quickly unpause the video here. Also, this setup also has Nourish, so it's going to be free viral damage on top of all that. Now we'll hop into the mission. I actually decided to go to a Lua Conjunction Survival instead, just because the enemies here are higher level. They're 180 to 200. So this is an even better example of how strong the weapon is, because, you know, of course, the enemies here will have higher scaling. I don't know why these guys are only this level. That's weird. Alright, can you get out of here, please? You guys are ruining my showcase. I did, of course, replace the Expel mod with Expel Aroken since I switched to this mission. And yeah, here you go. Here's the performance. So these enemies are even higher level than the previous showcase, and yet the kill rate is, of course, much better because we're buffing the living hell out of this weapon. And now here I'm orange critting because of my cat, so that's another example of a kind of buff you can get when you account for companions. Occasionally randomly buffing you like that.
All manner of Orokin technology may work here due to the Circulus's proximity.
The Octi-Core is, of course, very tasty when your companion decides to make you do that. So thank you, Smita, for that showcase. And again, just look at how little you have to aim with this weapon. You just shoot in the general direction of where enemies exist. Yeah, we're already past 200 kills by the 1 minute 20-second mark. And again, against higher level enemies in the previous test, because this is what happens when you buff the weapon with all these buffs. We'll see how many kills we have at the 2-minute mark here. My cat is making me orange crit again, which is insane. But again, the point of this test was showing, you know, buffing the weapon, so I guess my Smita is just in on the video. That's what I pay him for. There we go, 296 kills, so nearly 150 KPM. So that's pretty good. And I will tell you, these enemies are lower enough level that with this amount of buffs, the orange crits didn't really actually make a difference. It would have basically been 300 kills in 2 minutes regardless. Because this is already so much overkill damage for this level of enemy, even though they are level 200 on Steel Path. I mean, you really can't even tell the difference here, can you? Here, the buff is worn off, and it's still killing them absolutely instantly. So, it makes the screen look prettier, but it doesn't really change anything, because the weapon was already way stronger than these enemies can handle. Now let's showcase my favorite example of making this weapon absolutely disgusting. That example, of course, being Saryn. Perhaps the best, if not clearly one of the best weapon platforms in the game, especially when you're running 2 emerald shards on her to fully strip armor off via corrosive procs. So let's go ahead and hop into here. So for this Saryn build, well, first of all, let's look at the actual Saryn build. So I am using Avenger. I'm not using Velocity, so I'm going to put Lethal Torrent back on. So we're still getting that Avenger benefit, the crit chance benefit that you saw from the Revenant showcase. But let's put Lethal Torrent back on here, just for that fire rate, because we like fire rate. And we'll just use this regular version of the build. So again, this is Viral Heat, and then on my Saryn, you get extra toxin damage on the side from Toxic Lash, and I'm using Venom Dose. This is going to be free extra corrosive and toxin. So this Octi-Core is now going to be Puncture Radiation, which is innate, and then Viral Heat, Corrosive Toxin. So 6 status effects, which of course is scaling the absolute hell out of Galvanized Shot, along with all that extra dot damage of those toxin procs, and the free armor strip from that free corrosive damage. So this is going to be fantastic. So let's go ahead and of course, still the crit chance from Avenger. So let's go ahead and hop back into that mission and show my favorite example of buffing the absolute hell out of the Octi-Core. First though, let's say you want to go really crazy. Let's say you want to put on a Furax, and you want to throw on Amalgam Furax body count And this gives you another plus 45% fire rate for secondary weapons. Boom, there you go. Let's run that also. And it's like you're running a little mini version of Velocity. Now let's hop back into that mission and showcase this. I gotta say, this pose goes pretty hard. Just wanted to throw that in there real quick. Anyways, on to the mission. Let's go ahead and start it up here. Let's pop that Venom Dust, pop that Toxic Lash. Get my weapon back because these guys are thieves. Very rude of them. Oh, I'm also using the Aphentus, which is even more fire rate. That wasn't even planned, I just forgot I had that on. Can you guys please die? Why are you so tanky? The Aphentus is 20% fire rate, by the way, from that little radial zone buff. Yeah, now you can't even see the screen because there's so many different procs coming up. I mean, this is just disgusting on Saryn. For my Gloom on so I don't kill myself because Combat Discipline is doing damage to me every time that I kill an enemy. Again, I have that on for the easy Arcane Avenger trigger. So even if I don't get hit, it still triggers for me doing self-damage. So we're at the 1 minute mark. We got 136 kills. Let's repop that Venom Dose and that Toxic Lash. Keep that up. My cat's not even proccing this time, but you can see it doesn't really matter because the kill rate is insane. Again, I got 2 Emerald Shards on Saryn, so on top of all this extra, like, front-loaded damage bonus, I'm also totally taking off their armor from those corrosive procs. On that Revenant showcase, I actually should have switched to the corrosive build. I just realized that because I was using Nourish. But that's okay. Still killed stuff. Let's see where we hit at the 2 minute mark here. Try to get as many kills as I can. So 2 minute mark, yeah. So again, about 300 KPM. So I was close to the same. The reason why I was close to the same, even though I guarantee you this setup is way more damage, is because these enemies are just simply too low level for the amount of damage that this outputs to actually show the scaling difference. So if these guys were like, you know, level 5, 6, 700 plus, then you could start to see the differentiation between the amounts of damage from those two builds. But both of those builds, like the Revenant version and this version, are both so overkill that we're pretty much capping out the time to kill or the KPM of the Octicore, essentially, because they're just, these guys aren't strong enough to handle this damage output. Which shows you how strong you can make the Octicore for Steel Path, depending on what kind of buffs you want to throw onto it. So yeah, let's hop back to the ship here. So speaking of the corrosive build that I mentioned, if you are going to run a corrosive heat setup, like on a setup that uses Emerald Shards, for example, then you can just swap out Frostbite for Jolt, and there you go. Now it's corrosive heat, which would be definitely larger damage than the viral setup. If you're going a full strip setup, because once you get to high enough level on Steel Path, enemies have 2700 armor, and taking all that off is basically a 10x damage increase. So that's a really nice damage increase to allow you to scale your heat procs. So that's all you gotta do to make a corrosive heat build. Of course, like I said, you can drop Lethal Torrent for a Primed Expel mod if you're gonna run like Velocity. I think it's a good value swap there. Other than that, like I said, guys, the weapon is absolutely insane. There was a few examples for you, all the way from unbuffed up to super buffed. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and this, you know, resolves the question of why do I like the Octicore so much? Why do I think it's so crazy? It's because of Sentient Surge, along with, you know, throwing buffs on top of it. That's pretty much the answer. The weapon's insane. Hopefully you guys get to try it out. If you don't have Sentient Surge, again, this augment will eventually come back in a future Nightwave. For example, hopefully it comes back in this coming Nightwave, because it has been like 2 or 3 Nightwaves now. So maybe in a few days here, you guys will be able to see this returning in the Nightwave store. Here's hoping. Anyways, if you liked the video, consider dropping a sub on the channel and clicking like on the video. You have no idea how much it helps. Really helps me, you know, get the algorithm on my side and get the video out there to more people. So I appreciate that if you're able to do that. Anyways, guys, I'll see you in the next one.